Howdy, folks. Jeff and John here with this week's episode of Tools, Technology, and Training.
I'm excited about this one. This is going to be good.
And we got special guest John Forro right here.
Electron John.
Electron John.
The
Hello,
man
everyone.
with the silver bullets.
Yep, Silver Bullet Man as well.
I love it.
Well, you said you had silver bullets and green bullets, but tell us a little bit about Electron John, because you do a lot of EV training right now.
I do. So Electron John is just my social media marketing name. I kind of stole the idea, if you want to say this, from Scanner Danner, so it rhymed.
Not Buckaroo, Buck, and Bob, though, right?
No. So, that's my social media marketing name. I do all types of training. EV is very hot topic right now, so I do quite a bit of that. And I've done every kind of automotive related training you could think of, with the exception of automatic transmissions. Although I can pass an ASE test on automatic transmissions, I'm definitely not an expert on those. So I'll never.
We're looking at your Camaro there in the background. Hopefully the folks will see that. But
That's beautiful.
There's a couple of things we want to talk with you about, and several more we're going to wind up asking you questions about. But the first one is Electron John, and you will get into the second part of why you think it's so important for technicians to get some EV training. But first part is you've actually made kind of two tools in one kit that will help the technicians right now, because a lot of folks get out to a charging station, and you could probably tell me, the percentages, but I hear there's a high percentages of the chargers, the EV chargers, that don't work. And then number two is you have to know, is it the charger or is it your vehicle? Because when you plug that receptacle in, basically your car has to do a handshake and say, hi, how are you? Let's talk, and agree to start charging the vehicle.
Correct. So as still a working technician, one of the largest complaints when it comes to plug-in hybrids or electric vehicles, consumer will bring a vehicle into a shop that says, it won't accept the charge. I plugged the car in all night and either it didn't charge at all, or it charged, but it charged maybe 4 miles of range or something very low like that. So as a technician, you have one of two problems. So the problem is either a faulty charger or it's a problem with the vehicle side. So as you were saying, with that handshake that occurs between the car and the charger, that's a very complicated thing, which I'm going to try to simplify real quick here. But, that's the first starting step. So, there's a lot of companies out there that make a tool that will, I shouldn't say a lot, there's a handful of companies out there that make a tool that will test chargers. Now, they're very expensive and they're not really made for technicians. They're made for electricians that are actually installing the chargers. And as a technician, I always say to myself, well, I got to know if the charger is good or bad. But, I don't necessarily need to simulate a ground fault and some of the things that's on the electrician side of things. Because if the charger's bad, it's not like the customer is going to want me to go to their house and rewire the charger for them, right? So I need to be able to first test the charger to make sure that the charger's working. So whether it's their charger or a charger that I have at the shop or whatever it is. So I want to rule out the charger. So the first box in my 2-piece kit actually will test the charger, and it will tell you if the charger's the problem, or if it's not, then it's probably going to be on the vehicle side. The second part of the box, the second part of the kit that I have, nobody else in the industry has something like this. And it's definitely going to allow me as a technician to diagnose and tap into those circuits, the charging circuits on the vehicle side. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening in all the lines. So I'm going to simplify. I don't care if you have a level 1, level 2, level 3 charger, or if it's a Tesla supercharger or a CHAdeMO plug or any of the type of chargers out there. You're going to have a few of the pins that are actually delivering voltage from the charger, right? So I can measure that voltage with the second box. I can measure it with the first box too, but I can measure that voltage. The real problems, and all those different types of cars have two other circuits. One's called a proximity detection, and one is called a control pilot. Now, to simplify it, the proximity detection basically is the circuit that tells the car that there's a charger plugged into it.
Oh.
And once it knows that there's a charger plugged into it, then the control pilot side of the circuit takes over control. And the talking, the handshake that's occurring is actually occurring between the charger and the onboard charger on the vehicle. So the onboard charger, so there's all different sizes of chargers. Real quick. And you could have a DC fast charger. Sometimes they were referred to as a level 3, but you could have a DC fast charger that's capable of putting out 200 kilowatts, 900 kilowatts, whatever. If the car can't handle that type of current being sent to it, it's never going to see it. So that's one of the main pieces of communication that's occurring. So talking before the show got started, we used the Chevy Volt with the V as an example. You know, that's a plug-in hybrid that's capable of about 13 kilowatts max. So even if I plug that into some really monstrous charger, it's never going to accept that full rate of charge because the car is always in control. And that's one of the key pieces of information that occurs on the control pilot circuit once the vehicle knows that there's a charger plugged in. Other stuff is stuff along the lines of temperature, the charging speed. So we'll give a real quick synopsis of how a good circuit is designed to work. So once you plug the charger in, the proximity detection circuit says, yeah, there's a charger plugged into me. Then the control pilot circuit takes over. The control pilot is actually starting not on the car side, but on the charger side. It's sending out a 12-volt signal. So when I first plug a charger into a car, I should see that signal drop to about 9 volts. 9 volts says, okay, there's a good connection. So I don't have an open circuit on the control pilot, but the car has not started accepting a charge yet. Then once the car starts accepting a charge, after a whole bunch of communications going back and forth between the charger and the car, then it will drop that voltage down to 6 volts. This is assuming everything's working properly. Now, the frequency of that signal is going to change based on how much current that car can accept. And every car is going to be different. So, you know, if we're talking a Ford Lightning, that's going to accept, you know, a pretty high rate of charge and a pretty quick rate of charge as well. If we're talking an older plug-in hybrid, that's going to throttle that speed way down. So to test that frequency, you're going to actually want to use either a digital multimeter or a lab scope. I prefer a scope, but you're going to want to see that signal. So the way how things are designed right now, there's no easy way for a tech to tap into that circuit. So with this box, I have, you know, banana jacks right there. So
He figured it out. He
right?
knows, baby. Cha-ching. I love that.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you know, the tech goes to training and they say, oh, you know, you can plug in your diagnostic tool and look at what the computer is reading to look for that 6-volt and then the 12-volt and then the 6-volt drop, or to look and see if the computer says, hey, proximity, I recognize there's a charger plugged in and I'll take the charge. Is that being able to see on the diagnostic tools that are out there, or then you have to get into more testing, which means pulling out the gloves, pulling out the double gloves and all the different tools.
All the things that keep Sparky from getting loose, huh?
Yeah, to start doing with the high voltage system, Whereas on your box, it actually has a connector that plugs right into the vehicle.
True. And the other thing, the scan tools will give you some of the information. So they'll tell you stuff along the lines of what the voltage is on line 1 and line 2. So is it 110, 120, whatever the case happens to be. So it'll tell you that. It will also tell you some of the control pilot voltages, right? It won't tell you everything that's going on. It will never tell you the charging speed, the frequency. So none of the scan tools are capable of telling you that. Also the proximity. So here's the deal with the proximity. So some cars have a 2700 ohm resistor in series between the charging port on the vehicle and the onboard charger on inside the vehicle. Some of them will have a 600 ohm resistor. Some of them are going to have a 300 ohm resistor. So everyone's a little bit different, right? So, and in order to test that, you can't test it with the circuit connected. So traditionally, you'd have to find the onboard charger on the vehicle, wherever it happens to be. Sometimes they're, underneath the hood and fairly easy to get to. Other times they could be underneath the back seat. They could literally be anywhere. And you have to remove that circuit from the onboard charger. Otherwise, the onboard charger is going to change that resistor. So first you want to test for just the 2700 ohms of resistance that's in that wire when it's not connected to anything. Then once it's connected to the onboard charger, depending on all the stuff that we've been talking about, that resistance is going to drop. And the level that it drops to basically is going to determine the first initial communication of what type of charger is plugged in to my vehicle right now. Is it a level 1 charger? Is it a level 2 charger? If it's a level 3 charger, what's the current output of that level 3 charger? Because at this point, the charger is the one that's doing the majority of the communication to the onboard charger on the vehicle. And then after the onboard charger on the vehicle starts communicating, I like to say that's kind of when the control pilot circuit takes over. And then a whole bunch of other types of information is actually being shared amongst the charger and the car. And, if the battery ever gets too hot throughout the charging process, that's gonna affect the control pilot circuit as well. So that's going to drop it down to 3 volts. If there's ever, a pretty serious problem, it's going to go to negative 12 volts. If it, once the vehicle is 100% charged, then obviously that voltage changes as well. So, all of these different scenarios are happening, and there's not a good, easy way for a technician to get the information that they need to help them diagnose what's wrong with this vehicle. So in essence, the first box tests the charger to get that out of the way. The second box is the one that I'm most proud of. That's the one that nobody else in the industry has anything like. And that allows an easy way for a technician to sample these signals and then take the test results and be able to properly diagnose the vehicle and hopefully repair the vehicle for the customer.
So I'm looking at your box with your tools on it, and basically what you have there is kind of like a breakout
Exactly.
boxes where you can hook on.
Yeah, so I refer to it as that. I'm like, it's kind of in essence a breakout box that goes between the charger that's plugged into the vehicle and the vehicle's charging port. So I can sample all of those communications that are going on between the two, because in essence, I basically have a breakout box installed there.
Without disassembling parts on the car.
Correct.
And I take it without having to put on the high voltage gloves.
Yep, don't have to put on the high voltage gloves at all. So
oh my gosh, yeah, I'm looking at this and listening, and it's like, yes, this is just like a great step in between.
A lot of the dangers and hazards of this stuff.
Yeah, right there at the beginning, it's like, okay, we're not having to make sure we're not touching orange. We're not having to make sure we're pulling the fireman's loop. We're not having to invest in the gloves just to do some basic testing. Now, when you talk about the charger, so is the charger like the customer can bring theirs with them?
So depending on the charger that they have, so every time you buy an electric car or plug-in hybrid, it's going to come with what we call an emergency charger. So a
Okay.
lot of times that's a level 1 charger, and we call it emergency because a level 1 charger typically will put out about 1 kilowatt of power. If I've got, just say, for instance, a 55 kilowatt battery in a plug-in hybrid vehicle, that means it's going to take 55 hours to charge that battery, right? So it's an emergency charger. If they bought a level 2 charger and had it installed at their residence, well, they're
Yeah.
probably bringing that with them. But by the same token, if their car doesn't accept a charge, most of humankind is smart enough to say, well, maybe I'm going to self-diagnose this. I know the car came with a charger. So the one that I got hanging on my wall doesn't seem to be charging my car. Let me take the one out of the trunk that came with the car and plug that in and see if that works.
And just see if I
Yeah.
get anything.
I see if you get anything.
And so it's not, I mean, this can be used by mobile technicians. Like if they went to a house and they could just plug in real quick
Sure.
and say, yeah, your charger's working, or no, your charger's not. And at
Yep.
that point, it's like, call the electrician.
There's so many uses for it. It could be used by anybody that drives an EV or a plug-in hybrid vehicle. You hit the nail on the head when you said a lot of public chargers are not functional, right? That's
Yeah.
the one complaint. So they can actually use it to test those. They're not going to care because they're not their chargers, but
Yeah.
they can say, okay, well, I know that this charger's not working. It could be the EVSE, electric vehicle service equipment site. So, if I'm a businessman and I decided that's how I'm going to make my living, I'm going to get a whole bunch of different types of chargers, open them up to the public, and I'm going to charge them to charge your vehicles. So EVSE operators, they could use it to test the chargers, but
And just a real quick test.
yeah, I bleed auto tech, right? So, I've been an auto tech my whole life. So whenever I make something like that, I'm not really looking at other industries like EVS stuff. I'm looking at, hey, a technician's got a
Making our
problem.
job,
Yeah.
making our job easier.
Yep. And I want to make it as easy as possible. And, that's how I know it's a valid tool, because there's been so many times that I've had that type of complaint. And, I have the Fluke and I have some of the other ones that test the charger. So I could test the charger before. And then I'd be like, okay, so it's on the car side. So now I got to start doing disassembly. I got to start doing all kinds of crazy stuff to diagnose what the problem is on the vehicle side. And I always said to myself, wait, it'd be so much easier if I could just tap into what's going on between the car and the charger, because that's going to make my job so much easier. So that's kind of how I came up with the idea for that.
And right now, this particular idea is actually in the contest. And we know SEMA and Apex is coming up, and they always do contests to find out the new top 20 tools. And this is, did you tell me motor?
Yeah. So every year, Motor goes ahead and opens up a contest for the top 20 tools. And I've been fortunate. I've won this award a couple times for training classes and different books that I've wrote over the years. And, not to venture too far off the subject, but when it
haven't won one for a tool.
I have not won one for a tool. And, the first time I won one was for a book. It was the first time a book ever won a top 20 tool award. And at the time there was an awards dinner. And I was young. I was in my late 20s. And the dinner.
Really young, like me.
Dinner.
I was young too once.
So the theory behind it is 20 different companies win this award for a top 20 tool for the year. So at this dinner, the first time I won it, there's tables for every one of the companies that won. And you'd go up and accept the award and you'd introduce the people from your table. So I'm sitting there and I'm Snap-on, OTC, huge companies. And they're like, so this is the CEO of Snap-on, this is whatever. So when it comes up to me, I go up, I accept the award, I thank everybody. And I'm like, yeah, so there's my mom and there's my dad, and that's my wife. That's
I
it.
was going to say,
Nobody else.
did you have a school table over in the corner?
I love it.
Yeah.
They don't do those award dinners anymore. They just give the award. But I would, this tool, I feel I've never won one for a tool before. I've won the P10 award. I've won the Motor Top 20 Tool Award, but it's always been for either training classes or different manuals that I wrote. So this one is near and dear to my heart because I want to win one for a tool so that I kind of feel like it better fits the name description, I guess, tool, right?
Electron John. So
Yeah.
John, where can all the folks that've been taking your training and all the folks in the industry know you and they would really love to support you. Where can they go to vote for this, and how long does the voting last?
So they can vote one time a day. So technically they can vote one time a day from one IP address. So if anybody really wants to do me a favor, get a whole bunch of different IP addresses. You can vote a bunch of times, but they can vote one time a day. They go to motor.com, and as soon as that page opens up, there's going to be a Motor Top 20 Tool Award. It says vote now. They're going to select vote now. There's about 50 different entries. Obviously 20 people are going to win. They just scroll on down to find the tool, the two-piece set tool. It's called EV Diagnostic or EV Detective Kit. And once they find that, they can submit a vote and help me make this dream of mine
Dream come true.
So is it one vote per person? Is one vote per day?
One vote per person per day on a computer.
Yes.
On an
So
IP address.
Yeah, so on an IP address. So they can vote from their cell phone, their tablet. But once they vote one time that day, they can't vote again till the next day. And they can vote all the way between now and August 31st. And sometime in September, Motor will announce the 20 winners of the award.
And so then the award, is it given at Apex and SEMA?
It is. So it's given out at Apex and SEMA.
Apex and SEMA. You said you'll be teaching at Apex this year on EV, was it battery?
Yep, high voltage battery diagnostics. So I'll be down in Joe's garage area at Apex.
Yeah, back in the back corners.
Yep.
Where all the classrooms are.
Yeah, and I'll be teaching a high voltage battery diagnostics course over there. I believe it's just once, but it might repeat itself. I don't know. This is all the details haven't fully emerged on that yet. So I don't know the exact day or the time. They haven't sent me the schedule for that yet, but once I see the schedule, I'll let everybody know,
well, then reach out to us so that we can share it. Sure. Because we're just, this is the first time that I've visited with you, and we're not sure if you've ran into, you knew about Buckaroo, Buck and Bob over here, all out in the industry, and you've been to all the different places doing training. And how can so if I know at Apex they have to pre-register for the classes, they have to prepay,
right?
Because you tried to sneak in and they said, "Where's your ticket?" Well, here, I'll pay you, and they go, "Now you have to go."
You have to go get a ticket and bring it to me.
Register for Apex. Is that when they register for your class?
Yeah. So that's when they would have to register for the classes, when they register for
and
Apex.
you can go back in and register for the class.
So if they've already registered for Apex and SEMA, which they should have by now, they can go back and modify and say, "Hey, I want to take John Forro's class."
But they don't have his classes scheduled yet. So you can't.
They don't have mine scheduled. So this all just happened maybe about 3 weeks ago. I was reached out and they said, "Hey, do you want to teach something here?" I've taught at Apex. I've taught at, Vision. I taught a lot of different places. And so they reached out to me and I said, perfect. I'll do something. They wanted something EV. So I'm like, all right, I'll do high voltage battery diagnostics. And so they have not actually publicized that that's going to be going on yet, but they've already told me they've already approved the class. I've already sent them the handouts and everything so that they can pre-print those handouts for all the attendees and everything. So they have everything for it.
Share your thoughts on technicians learning about EVs right now, because it's a hot topic, but is it something that the technicians in the shops should be worried about or should get involved about? I think, I've already done a bunch of the training, and I think it's like, if you want to keep up with modern times, you need to keep pace and start finding out about this stuff now before it starts getting in your shops.
Sure. I agree with this 100%. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, no matter what your feelings are about the electrification of the automotive industry, the way this is going, I tell people, I'm like, there's a lot of pushback when computer controls came on cars as well. Everybody said it's a passing fad, it's going to go away. We can see how that worked out, So the federal government has backed this with billions of dollars that they want this. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be the only source of propulsion of a vehicle going down the road. I'm sure there's going to be hydrogen fuel cells and a whole bunch of different things. And plus, in all of our lifetimes, there's still going to be plenty of gas and diesel vehicles to work on.
Amen.
However, electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids, I call it electric drive because even a regular hybrid has a lot of the same similar parts and works the same way as a full-fledged electric vehicle. So electric drive vehicles are definitely going to be a huge percentage. So the sooner a shop or a technician accepts the fact that this is going to happen, not only will they be safer when those cars come into their shop and they're working on them, but they're going to be further ahead of their competition because there's a lot of people still that are naysayers. I mean, you see the same stuff, you go on LinkedIn or whatever, and somebody puts out an EV article and a lot of people are behind it saying, great job, very informative, but there's always those other people that chime in and they're going to say, well, that's stupid, it's never going to happen. Toyota's making a hydrogen fuel cell that's going to take over everything. Well, we don't know if that's actually going to be the case or not. I doubt it because the government has spent way too much money for that to be the only possible choice. I think it's a mixture of different types of technology. And, Tesla's the number one EV vehicle for years after years after years. There's so many Teslas on the road, which is why the industry's using the Tesla, switching over to the Tesla charging connectors, because there's so many chargers out there for Teslas that actually work compared to for the other makes and models of cars that they're trying to ramp up all these charger installations and everything. So that was one of the sticking points to get the consumers behind it is, that electric car thing, it's kind of a nice idea, but I can't take it on a trip because I got to plan my trip according to chargers. So I might have to drive 100 miles out of my range to get to a charger as I'm going from point A to point B. So, the auto manufacturers and government know this. So there's incentives out there where there's a NEVI incentive that the government will give you $70,000 towards the installation of a level 3 charger if it's in the right location. So the stipulations are it's got to be close to a freeway exit and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of free money that the government's passing out to force people to understand that, this zero emission vehicle of electric vehicles is going to be at least one of the ways of the future here. And they're not just going to throw all that money away. So electric vehicles aren't going anywhere. They're going to be around. The sooner you embrace the technology and get the training, get the equipment and everything that you need, the better off you're going to be. And you might not think that that's a good thing to go, but your competition may say, no, that's great. I'm going to go ahead and get the training. And then fast forward 5 years and you're getting, 15 to 20 electric drive vehicles in your shop each and every week. And if they're in there for something other than tires or something, but even that's not even a good analogy because electric vehicles are different than gasoline and diesel, because if a gasoline or diesel car is not running, you're not using any fuel. An electric vehicle has a battery management system whose sole purpose in life is to protect the battery. So something that everybody can understand, there's other stuff too, but if that battery ever starts to get too hot, whether or not you have that car turned on, it's going
cool
to
it off.
drain that high voltage battery. So you can't give the customer their car back and say, yeah, so we did the tires and we did your front suspension and stuff like that, because electric cars are heavier, so those parts wear out faster. But while it was here and while we were waiting for parts and stuff, give me the $2,000, whatever your repair bill is. But we noticed you've only got 2 miles of range to make it to the next charger, right? You can't do that to the customer. You got to be able to give them enough range to get to where they're going so that they could
That's
charge
right.
the battery up. So, simple things like that is, so many people don't understand it. But if your competition knows it and you don't, and they're equipped and trained to service these vehicles, and now all of a sudden you're getting 15 to 20 EV type of cars in your shop, you're going to be losing a lot of money as a result of it, let alone the safety factors. I mean, you want to keep everybody safe in your shop as well.
That's right.
And see, that was part of the deal. Went up to ICAR for their training with hands-on training. Was they were saying you need to have someone in your shop that can verify that vehicle is safe to work on.
Exactly. That preached that very heavily. Yes.
And that's one thing that I try to share a whole lot is if you don't do any other training, is get the training so that you can determine that vehicle safe to number one, bring in your shop. Number two, safe for another tech to work on it. Because just talking about basics like the tires, okay, number one is they have to be able to properly lift that. Number two is that's a heavier vehicle. So you have to have different arms, and the lift has to be able to take the weight. And if you're going to have just a tire tech, pulling the tires off, it's like, okay, is that safe to bring in the vehicle? Is that safe for that tech to touch it?
Yep.
And then you go from there, and then you go on, because then you get into, okay, hey, we're going to do the brakes on them, and we're not necessarily replacing brake pads as we are lubricating everything.
Yep.
Because those brake pads basically don't get used that much.
Nope. Regenerative braking.
And you're up in Ohio. Tell us, y'all get any rust? What's that stuff called, rust? Y'all get any rust up there?
We got tons of rust, and we deal with that all the time. The other thing too, let's say I was a shop owner that said, I'm not going to service anything high voltage related on EVs, right? As you were saying before, just being able to lift the vehicles to do tires and stuff like that. You gotta understand the lifting points. Those high voltage wires are running underneath the vehicle. You don't want to damage the battery pack. You don't want to pinch the wire, but let's say somebody brought me their car and they said, hey, can you change a stereo in my car? Now, a lot of shop owners might think that's low voltage, or maybe add some lights to it or whatever, something on the low voltage side. Well, you can't just install these extra add-on components to an electric vehicle like you once did for a non-electric vehicle. An electric vehicle uses an isolated ground, and since you went to ICAR, all about bonding and everything else. You can't do anything jeopardize the safety that's built on those cars. So, and then just adding a simple ground cable. So let's say I'm going to install just an extra light on the vehicle for whatever purpose, and normally you might say, well, I'm going to just use a sheet metal ground or something like that. You can't do that, so there's so many things that a lot of technicians don't stop to think about when they're dealing with this newer type of technology. And I can't stress enough that everybody needs to have a good understanding. I tell people all the time, you have zero shot at fixing something if you don't understand how it's supposed to work, right? So I tell
along that line, how many shots do you have on you can mess up and touch a high voltage line?
yeah. So
You don't get any shots.
no,
Dirk Dukes will
not
tell
at
you don't get one chance.
not at
You
all.
have, you have to know. And so, the several other things along that line is because, when you're talking about, hey, we're doing front end suspension because it's heavier. Hey, there's cooling systems. And we all know, the deck's cool. Yeah, it'll go 5 years, 150,000 miles. That stuff will not freeze.
Yes.
But it becomes corrosive. And so these systems need to be serviced. And how many cooling systems do we have on EV systems?
So most true EV cars will have at least 3 cooling systems on them. One usually dedicated just for the high voltage battery, one dedicated for the passenger compartment, and then one dedicated for the other electronics. Some of the more higher end EVs will have even more than 3 cooling systems on them. And that means that there's 3 electric coolant pumps. And by electric coolant pumps, those electric coolant pumps oftentimes are not low voltage, they're high voltage electric coolant pumps. So, there's so many things that it's kind of like a domino effect when you're dealing with it. And I'm not trying to use a scare tactic because it's still a car. There's still going to be things that require service, as you were alluding to. It's still going to need tires. It's going to probably want special tires because an EV makes no noise. So you can't have road noise from tires or else customers are going to complain about it. So even if you were just
carry the weight too.
Yeah, it's got to carry the weight too. So, doing the tires and, anything low voltage and, as you said, cooling systems. It's not just flushing out one cooling system anymore. It's multiple cooling systems. And the list just goes on and on of service potential that you can do. The really advanced shops will probably get into something that's called battery balancing. And battery balancing, when the batteries become out of balance, 2 things happen. Number one, it shortens the overall life of the vehicle. It affects the vehicle's performance, and it also will lose mileage. So as an example, if you bought an EV car that had 300 miles of range when it was fully charged, over time, as the internal resistance of those battery cells increase, they become out of balance. So now you don't have 300 miles. You got 287 miles on a full charge, 260 miles on a full charge. So I call that the modern day tune-up. So you could do a battery balancing procedure. The customer knows that you did your job because the next time they charge your car, they should get that lost mileage back. So it'll have a little display on the dash and they don't question anything. But it also helps prolong the life of the battery. And everybody knows that the high voltage battery is the most expensive part. Sometimes it could be as little as $3,000 to $5,000, which is still a lot of money. But, on Teslas and stuff, it could be $20,000. Nobody wants to replace a high voltage battery on a vehicle. It's very expensive. So everybody, a shop owner that talks to their customers and they say, hey, we noticed, or maybe the customer brought it to them and said, hey, I'm losing mileage on a full charge. So, or maybe the shop owner noticed that and they say, hey, so I can get those lost mileage back for you. And plus the procedure that I'm doing is not only going to overall increase the actual performance of your vehicle, because an unbalanced battery is going to drain faster at a higher rate of speed than one that's properly balanced. So not only will I, improve the performance of your vehicle, but it's also going to help you get the longest life possible out of that high voltage battery. And you say those words, everybody, I don't care if you're a tech or not a tech, everybody knows that that's an expensive repair. So they come in and I call it the modern day tune-up, and they'll gladly give you that money, especially if they're losing mileage between charges anyways.
Right.
And then as a benefit, they get to help prolong the life of their battery. So that's going to be the ones that the real good shops are going to start embracing here in the near future, besides just doing regular types of repairs when stuff goes bad. But there's a lot of service potentials out there that can do the customer a justice on their vehicle, plus, make a couple bucks for the shop by performing the service.
Yeah, and then that's all part of like when you're balancing, then you also have to have your charger there. But explain balancing just a little bit more, because when they talk about a battery pack, a lot of them don't realize, the technicians, that basically you're talking about 1.25 to 1.75 in most cases, like rows and rows of AA batteries hooked together, and you're looking for the difference, which if one's too high, that can also cause an overheat or a possible thermal event.
Yep. So with the balancing, we'll use Tesla as an example, because that's the one that's most shocking to everyone. So there'll be those little 18650 batteries or lithium batteries, and they look like AA batteries, but there's 1,600 of those in.
Say that one more time. How many?
1,600. Now, when you open up a Tesla battery pack, you don't see all those, because those are separated into modules. And now each module will have 100 in it. So that means there's 16 modules if you were to open up a Tesla battery pack. So I've got 1,600 cells. Picture it this way. Let's say I had a flashlight and it was filled with 1,600 AA batteries inside this flashlight. Well, those batteries will discharge at different rates because of what we call the internal impedance. So as these batteries wear, that internal resistance will start to increase. That's all, and we get real technical, that's from the coating of the anode and cathode coming apart inside of it, all this other stuff. So, there's that internal resistance starts to increase. Now, when I go to charge it, right? So if I have batteries that are all over the spectrum out of balance, when I go to charge it, the battery management system, its whole purpose in life is to protect that battery. So what they will do is they will look at the battery that actually has the highest charge in it. And that's what they're going to charge all 1,600 of these batteries off of. So there's a little variance between that. Manufacturers will eventually set a diagnostic trouble code for it, but most of the time these batteries have to be within 40 millivolts, 60 millivolts. Some of the older cars were 20 millivolts. If they get out of range by that small amount, millivolts aren't very much, then it will set a diagnostic trouble code. Problem is, the diagnostic trouble code it sets, especially if you don't understand everything we just said, it says that the high voltage battery has degraded. So for the average person that doesn't fully understand what that means, they're replacing a high voltage battery pack to the tune of several thousand or tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, 10,000, something like that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, where in essence, they could actually not only fix that diagnostic trouble code or that wrench light that came on the dash, or the triangle of death from Toyota, or whatever the warning lights are, they could actually perform a service, take care of that code, get those lights off on the dash, increase the mileage, increase the performance, and prolong the life of the battery for nowhere near that kind of cost to the end user. So, and that's something that a lot of shops don't even understand, that that's something that they can do. And customers will gladly do that, because right now, the majority of people that are servicing EVs, if they get that code and they don't understand about battery balancing, they're just automatically changing that battery pack, which will fix it because it's going to be a brand new battery, right? But that old battery still has a lot of life. Speaking of that, even once the battery's bad in an EV, there's whole new industries for renewable energy. So the EV battery isn't just thrown away. It still has many purposes in life. It could be used to power up an EV charger. It could be used for solar panels on your house. There's so many different uses for an EV battery when it's deemed no longer worthy of being an electric vehicle. So that's another whole new industry that's coming out. I actually built a whole training class around that at the request of somebody I was talking to that got hired, that was awarded a $14 million grant from the government because that state is going with all electric buses. And one of the problems is the infrastructure to power up all these level 3 chargers. It's very expensive for the state because the wires can't handle it. So they would have to change all the wiring that's underground. And I'm like, no, you don't. I'm like, so basically you hook up the battery wall, is what this is now called. You hook the battery wall up to the infrastructure, and then the charger is hooked to the battery wall. So the charger is never putting the demand on the infrastructure. It's putting it on the battery wall, which is absorbing the big demand. So, you know, if you're talking about putting in 2 million chargers in the state, then yeah, you're still going to have to upgrade it. But if you're talking putting in, 500 chargers across the state, you don't have to upgrade the infrastructure, because if you understand how all of this works, there's solutions for everything. So, there's so many things like that you can just keep talking on and on and on about, that most people don't fully understand. And, if they did understand it, they would understand that it's dangerous. Don't get me wrong. And it definitely requires training, but it's not a big, scary, evil entity that some people are trying to make it out to be. Can an EV battery catch on fire? It can definitely catch on fire, but do they just catch on fire all by themselves? No. So, they're in an accident. The battery enclosure has degraded, and now external elements, because most of these EV batteries are bolted underneath the car, external elements are salt water, and so you might say, well, I don't live by an ocean, right? So I don't have to worry about hurricanes. Well, I'm in Ohio. We have snow. To get rid of the snow in the wintertime, we put salt on the snow. So
Amen.
where do you think that salt water ends up? It ends up under the undercarriage of your car. So there's so many different things. Salt's very conductive, and there's so many different things. There's 7 stages of thermal runaway. And I can tell you without any hesitation that the car has built-in safety procedures to help prevent that from ever getting to stage 1, let alone stage 7. Now, at some point, the car can't stop it, right? So if the car got in a severe accident and the batteries were damaged and now they're shorted and the internal temperature starts to rise in there, no matter what the car does, it can't stop that. But that doesn't happen till like stage 3 or so, So, but for stage 1 and stage 2, there's safety precautions built into the cars that prevent that from ever getting to that, unless there's some kind of outside interference that's going on, or unless those features don't work on the car, which in that case, then it's our jobs as technicians to diagnose why they're not working and repair them.
So we could get into a whole nother class on just talking about, if the system disables itself, and then all of a sudden the electric water pumps and stuff won't come on to cool the batteries.
Yep.
But that's another deal. So when we're talking about the training, you do a lot of training, and you shared with us that you've been up in the Northeast, and you're going to be out at Apex and SEMA. And so you mentioned you've been at Vision. Are you going to ASTE?
I'm not. So I have been at ASTE in the past. I haven't been there the last couple years, but I have done that ASTE show. That's a great show. There's certain shows in our industry that are dedicated towards training, and then there's certain shows in the industry that is dedicated towards. So they'll give you some training, but it's more of like a tool show and distributors and stuff like that. And ASTE is definitely one of the shows that are geared more towards training than, they got a trade show attached to it too, but it's more geared towards the technicians learning stuff. So
my first time to ASTE just blew me away. It's like they opened a trade show up, and I'm going to go into trade show. I'm going to go into trade show. And next thing I know, they closed it. It was like open for like 2 hours. It's like, what was I doing for 2 hours? You know, so I know now, just do they open the trade show. Now I know why everybody floods in there as fast as they can get it through there. But like you said, it's 100% all about having the top trainers there at ASTE. You know,
and it's funny, we're talking about training, and Oscar Gomez just literally texted me and said he didn't know you was going to be on the show tonight. And you're actually going to be out in California with Oscar. When is that coming up?
So that's on October 19th. And if I'm wrong on that date, Oscar will correct us.
yeah, he will.
I'm gonna be out there for a CAT conference on the 20th and 21st. So I told Oscar, I'm like, hey, I got this vision. If you think you can get some guys together, we'll do it at your location, and we'll team teach it. And it's going to be a class. I'll let Oscar, since it's kind of his shop, I'll let him explain it all to you. But it's a very unique class. It's EV related, but it's unlike any other EV class that people have ever attended. So I'm kind of excited about that. I've got a lot of material already put together for that. I'm sure Oscar's doing the same thing. And that's going to be a one-night class. So obviously it can't be a full-fledged EV training class in one night.
No, not no time.
But for the topics that we chose, that nobody else in the industry has done these yet, it's going to be a very unique class, and it's going to be a pretty good class. So I'll let Oscar let the cat out of the bag, because he's taking the lead on the marketing materials and stuff, because I'm the world's worst businessman. And
Now, we had Oscar on last week. He didn't say a word about none of this.
Not at all. I can't believe it, you know. So he's not very good at marketing. I'm sitting here laughing because we had him on here for 40 minutes. They never said a word about it.
Never said a word. So we're going to have to get on Oscar and say, Oscar, buddy, you got to come on the J&J Show so we can share about all this.
So I posted a picture on Facebook while we're doing this interview with you. Mike Clary texted me, said, one of the top 5 instructors in the United States.
I guess I got to send him another check now, because
that's why I mentioned that.
So Mike, thanks for the compliment, and your check's in the mail. I would assume he's going to open up to anybody. So Oscar and I have been talking for a long time, several years, in fact. He's like, hey, can you come out here and do a class for if I get a bunch of guys together? And I'm like, sure. And then the couple times I've been out there, you know, scheduling didn't work out. So once I knew I was going to be at that CAT teacher conference, I messaged him again. I said, hey, so I'm going to be out there. I could come a day or two early if you think this would work. And he's like, yeah. So we started talking back and forth, and he's like, so what kind of training you want to do? He didn't ask me. I couldn't pick, like, we're going to do a lab scope class or nothing like that. He's like, what type of EV training do you want to do? You know? So I'm like, so here's the deal. I know that you get hired, meaning Oscar gets hired to go to Mexico, Auto Mechanica and stuff, and do some stuff on EV and everything. And we share information all the time. And I'm like, why don't we team teach this? Because you're also bilingual. And this is going to be a one and done for me. I'm never going to do this special class again, but I could easily see Oscar taking that and doing it all over the place. So I said, so I want to do something different. I don't want to do something that, you know, I don't want to do like a high voltage battery class, or I don't want to do, you know, an overall motor generator class, because there's so many different places where people can get that type of training. I'm like, why don't we do something that has never been done? And what we're going to do is we're going to, so there's a whole bunch of subjects, but it all centers around how an auto repair shop can market and create services that are needed by electric vehicles. So we
It's
said
what,
before,
it's what we've been talking
That's
about.
what we've been talking about.
Oh my
So we
gosh.
said
So here
before,
we
like,
are
cooling
brainstorming and you
systems,
guys already got it figured out.
fires, balancing batteries. You know, Oscar's like, I get so many requests on, you know, where they're hearing about it from. I have no idea, right? But I get so many requests of people call me up and say, hey, can you balance my battery? And, you know, right now,
So
not
the
many
consumer
shops
knows
do that.
about that.
Yeah.
Some of them
So,
do.
so I've done a lot of webinars, and sometimes talking to some other instructors, they're like, you know, they're hearing about this stuff from you because I do some webinars for Autel, and I've worked for, you know, I've been hired by different companies to work for them in the past, and you know, I do webinars for a company I used to work for, and we'd get like 20 or 40 people signed up for the webinar. So when Autel hired me to do some webinars for them, they're telling me to set it up on GoToWebinar and all this stuff. And they're like, select 10,000 registrants when you first start setting this up. And I'm like, what are you guys nuts? 10,000? There's not gonna be 10,000 people at this thing. So I got choices. I got 10,000, I got 3,000, and I got 1,000. So I'm like, I'm gonna select 1,000. That first webinar, we had over 1,000 people sign up for it, right? So, and I've done quite a few of these, and Autel's got them up on their YouTube channel, and they contact me and they tell me all the time. They're like, you know, they haven't contacted me for a couple months, but they're like, you know, these webinars have over 40,000 views and they're only like 6 months old, you know? And I'm like, well, that's great, I guess. I mean, I'm not getting any money for it, but you know, it's great that the information's getting out there. So a lot of times some you know, fellow instructors will say, you know, they're hearing about this from you because you're the one that keeps going out doing these webinars for thousands of people and, you know, talking about different subjects. And, you know, we did a whole thing on batteries. So obviously that topic came up, and, you know, it's just, I don't know if that's where they're hearing about it from or not. I mean, there's tons of other people that do that type of training as well, but that's always been an ongoing joke when I get together with some of my fellow peer instructors. Yeah, it's a totally unique class, and you know, I don't want to tell all the different topics, but it all has to do with the way that an auto shop can create revenue on these new electric drive vehicles. So there's
I'd
a
say
lot of stuff I want to talk about.
that's what we're trying to explain and tell people. And it's so funny that one of John's good friends, who shall remain nameless, you know, taught a class on EVs, and he puts up on this board and all these numbers, and it's like, okay, don't worry about this, don't invest in this. You know, it's 0.05% of the vehicles that are out there. And it's like, okay, don't stick your head in the sand. You have to know about it. Just like when the carburetors went to the electronic ignition. And then, like you said, now, we see vehicles with 2730 computers on there, and you're saying it's up to 60 on some of them. And that's all the electronics and stuff. And now you're converting, okay, we got hybrids, and the Prius has been around for a while. That we've all dealt with, and nobody really went, oh, you know, we need to put, you know, heavier tires on there because, you know, they need to support the weight. And one of the things that folks aren't realizing is all the maintenance. And like we talked about the rust up in Ohio versus down here. And one of the things you pointed out was when we were in Vegas and sitting on that giant Ferris wheel, Tesla has a supercharger station there, and about half of them were undercover because they're longer term. And then you have the quick chargers sitting out. And one of the things that you explained was the heat, just being in Texas, the heat, if the vehicle isn't under a cover while it's being charged, can affect the charging rate and everything else. And then if the shops start looking at little basic stuff, okay, tires and brakes, and now we talked about cooling systems. It's like you want some revenue, and you want streams of revenue and additional. We know California started with these EVs and is trying to get the ICE ones out of there before everybody else, then,
Yep.
you know, and we've been talking to Oscar about, you know, some different business opportunities as far as management and how to market your shop. Oh my gosh. If you're not talking right here on, hey guys, here's opportunities.
This is it. This is great. I mean, it's cha-ching all the way to the bank, baby.
Yeah. But you just have to start going to some of these classes. So we know you're going to be out there with Oscar. Then you're going to be at Apex and SEMA, and you said mostly Apex.
I tell people all the time, I'm like, everybody in your shop should be coming to some EV training right now. Obviously, the technicians, everybody knows why they need to go. But that person that's talking to the customer, they need to know too. So the service manager, service writer, whatever the shop situation happens to be, everybody should be talking to the customer. Everybody should be knowledgeable so that they can, you know, relay information knowledgeably to the consumer. Plus, think about this, the person that answers the phone, if somebody calls up and they have a simple question about EV and they give them either wrong information or they tell them, I don't know. Well, the damage you just did, you are no longer going to be on that customer's radar when they need work for anything on that car. You know, lots of other smart marketing people have said, you know, I'm not really in business to allow people to come use a charger in my parking lot, right? Because what are you collecting? 20 bucks, 30 bucks, depending on the car at a time. But if I put a charger out there, I have just soft sold my business. Everybody in the neighborhood sees that I have an EV charger. So whether or not I know anything about EVs, I established my shop as the go-to shop for EV service. Because if they got a charger, common sense would tell you, well, they must know about EVs if they got a charger out there. So, I mean, there's so many different marketing ploys like that when it comes to that, to marketing yourself for an EV friendly, EV certified repair shop, that when something does arise, a customer has a need, they know that, hey, you know, Jeff's shop, my father's shop down the street, doesn't just work on gasoline and diesels. He also works on hybrids and plug-in hybrids. So I don't need to find a new shop. I can continue to take my car to my trusted mechanic. So I tell people all the time, everybody in your shop should be coming to some level of EV type of training. You know, from the person that answers the phone to the service manager, service writer, obviously the technicians definitely need to know it. The person washing the car needs to know it too. I mean, driving an EV is different on different types of vehicles. And, you know, a lot of vehicles, if there's anything plugged into the charge port, the car won't move. Whether or not it's in drive or not, it's not going to move. So, you know, if somebody wants, if there's a charger plugged in and the guy that says, hey, I just got to move it over 2 inches, so I'm not going to unplug it because it's got 25-foot cable on the thing. I'm just going to, you know, power it up and move it over. It's not going anywhere, most cars, right? So just so many different features like that that we could literally spend a month talking about.
Oh my gosh, John, we could spend hours just talking to you about some of the training and some of the tidbits and stuff. So we appreciate so much that you took time, and this was great, wasn't it, John?
It's so full of knowledge, you know.
My God,
So much there.
so
It
let's
just flows out of like good cold water. You know, it's just good stuff.
so let's cover one more time. They go to motor.com and give a vote for your EV detective tool.
Yep.
And then we got electronjohn.com.
Yes, that's my personal website. I don't update it as often as I should. Like I said, I'm the world's worst businessman. So it does get updated, but it comes in spurts. So when I get that bug to update the website, there'll be like 15, 20 new things up there. But then there'll be, you know, a couple months go by and it doesn't look like, anything's happening. But I guarantee you there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes. And if you go to that website, there's all kinds of free articles. There's free silver bullets, some green bullets. There's EV acronyms that I give away for free on there. There's my go-to EV related PIDs. So what do I use these different diagnostic PIDs for on EV cars? How do I use that in my diagnostics? I got those up there for free. So there's a lot of free stuff, but then there's also stuff how I make my money. So you could buy, training classes, training book. You could buy the EV detective kit. So, not everything on there is for sale. There's more free stuff actually than there is stuff for sale on that site.
And then your original site, it's on Facebook, AST Automotive.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to really get myself in trouble for this, but nobody brings a car to a repair shop. So ASP stands for Automotive Service Technology Training Incorporated, right? That's the name of my company. But no consumer is going to bring a car to a repair shop that has the word training in it, right? So what I did was I just called it AST, and then people would bring the cars in. If they ever asked, what does AST stand for? I'm like, it stands for Automotive Service Technology. I would never say the training part if they're in for auto repair. But technically, I only own the one company, which is Automotive Service Training Incorporated. So AST Training is the one company that I own, and I just leave the word training off for the auto repair shop side of things.
Well, John, we appreciate so much. We have so much overload on information here, and it's like we need to get you on one of the monthly Zooms. I'm just overwhelmed and thrilled that you would take time and share with us here on the J&J Show, Tools, Technology, and Training, especially since John's over there texting all of your cohorts, Oscar, and
they're hammering me, dude.
And Mike, and
well, I appreciate the invitation, and I'll come back anytime as long as I'm available, not teaching a class or something. I'll always share any kind of information I have with any of you guys or any of your audiences as well. So, okay.
Anything you'd like to say in closing there?
It's been an honor today to be with you. I'm really thoroughly enjoying the amount of knowledge that just comes right out of you, just off the tip of your tongue. It comes out freely. And I know a bunch of people that and they all talk highly, 100% positive about you.